Hello, welcome to day 4 of 30 days, 30 videos challenge. This is Andy Herrick with Ignite Best Practices, Saturday, May the 30th, and it's about 11:14 p.m. And this is my she shed. So let me see if I can just pound this down and put it up before the day is out. I'm going to talk today about ego mechanisms, ego self-defense mechanism, ego defense mechanism, coping mechanisms that are ego-oriented. Call it what you will. I like to share a book I recently read. It's called Hide and Seek, The Psychology of Self-Deception by Neil Burton. And in here, he just does this long laundry list of various defense mechanisms, what they are, how they play out, how they run away with us, kidnapping us, and leading them into very negative outcomes. And when 25% or more of various aspects of our daily living and relationships is impacted and at a deficit, now we have a situation called medical necessity because we have a mental health disorder situated as a result. So he explains that people employ these things and they're all around the ego. So think about that window of tolerance. This is when the people go hypo anxiety hypo depression or hyper anxiety in order to avoid becoming anxious or depressed. They can get out of it. It's going to happen. So they employ these mechanisms, and they all have to do with threats to the self versus anything else. It's really about our identity that we feel is being attacked, and they're very exclusive in that sense. So he also explains that the ego mechanism that becomes implemented ends up shaping the mental health disorder. So that is to say, look at the ego mechanism being used, that's your diagnosis. I don't know about that much, but it's a good piece of conversation to have and a nice perspective. And we can totally use it for our purposes tonight. These diagnoses come together with presentations of like derealization or disassociation, somatization. So it becomes really, really exacerbated. So you don't want it to get there. He suggests that if we were to stop, take so many steps back, and start examining and exploring the process and how the defense mechanisms, the event starts coloring that defense mechanism process as it's evolving, right? If we sit with it and we just start observing it and exploring it, we can use this information for a lot of insights, growth and development, which is life coaching. So he also suggests that this is very humanistic. People utilizing ego mechanisms are no indication that there is a mental health disorder associated with it. The mental health disorder precipitates from the way the mechanism runs away with us. So it's about us being in charge of it. So I'm going to start today, and I might have to do this in 2 parts to keep it short. I'm going to pick 4 defense mechanisms for our purposes tonight. Identification. It is when a person, let's say, instead of setting boundaries or cutting ties because they might not be able to take a child, they depend on their parents, or a spouse that is financially unable to leave the marriage or cannot leave the job, so you have a boss, whatever. Instead of setting these boundaries, you start identifying with that person, trying to become their friend, and even taking characteristics of them or defending them in many ways. So that's an identification. The person is in a lot of pain in here. But it becomes so acute and then chronic, because it stays that way, that the person loses their own sense of genuineness in the whole situation. Then we have intellectualization. And this is when people employ thinking in order to avoid sitting with their emotions. A lot of it is that we think we're so smart, how could this be happening to us? And sometimes it's just easier and less fatiguing to just say, hey, I'm blindsided and I feel really, really hurt about this. And this is just really affecting me. But instead, the person goes and think about, yeah, I even let it happen. If I had done this, and the shoulda, coulda, woulda, three-headed demon shows up. So when it gets away from us is when it's bad, but not when like, hey, what can I learn from this? That's different, right? But it is intellectualization. It's just an insightful way. Rationalization. This is when somebody, we've been doing something for someone, or someone comes and tell us, hey, listen, I've been doing this for you, but I cannot do it anymore. And you go like, well, I'm sorry, but not, I was really just trying to do you a favor. You look bored. So I wanted you to do something, and but it's okay. It's fine. And there's something happening in here. It's like, why couldn't we say, oh, I'm sorry you feel that way. I'm sorry you were taxed. Could you have told me sooner? Are you going to be okay? Is there anything I can do for you in turn? Instead of doing all these things, the message is taken so in the context of, they're doing this because they don't like us, and because they were doing this for us, we're the bad person. How could they say that? Of course not. So they're like, whatever. That's rationalization. They whatever, sure, whatever. Not good. So then idealization and devaluation, I'm putting them together as one because sometimes they're employed in a flip-flop kind of way, and that's called splitting. I'm not going to be discussing splitting, at least not tonight, but I am going to be talking about idealization and devaluation at one coin with two sides. Obviously, idealization, it's beyond just having an idol. This is when, let's say, my spouse or committed some kind of crime or something like that, and I know they're innocent. They couldn't have defrauded the bank, or they couldn't have committed adultery with the secretary or whatever. It's a false accusation. He is just so good that everybody just want to get at them and whatever, and there must be an angle because it's impossible. He's a saint. Or my wife, she just lost her mind. I mean, she's a very wonderful person and otherwise, and she didn't commit this college fraud. This is to try to get our daughters in. It's because she is if you only knew her like I know her, and I know she's going to be found innocent because blah 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 blah. And that's a person that emotionally cannot individualize themselves, so they idealize their partner because they have a necessity. They just cannot process the realities of what their spouse is doing or have done. In a very, very extreme case, the author here, Burton, cited a case in where the wife had these children. The father had taken the daughter into the basement, impregnated her with 7 children. 1 died, 3 were still downstairs in the cellar, the basement, and 3 babies showed up at the doorsteps, like an orphan will leave a baby in a basket kind of deal. The details of the story are not being told, just the case, but you get the idea. The wife, years and years and years, would have never even considered that the disappearance of her daughter Elizabeth had to do with her husband, because she idolized him. He was just a pillar in the community. So there you go. So and devaluation is when it doesn't matter, you just have complete disregard for that person. You just devaluate them completely. You have disregard, and anything good that they could possibly say or do for you, you look at the downside of it. You make it a point to teach them a lesson, to knock them off a couple of notches. You just can't let them, feel valued. It is your job to put them down. So there's a self-defense mechanism going on in there. So I'm going to use that one as an example, and I'm going to bring The Office, this show, the series. And there's this character named Angela that is really mean to everybody. She particularly likes to pick on Pam. And Pam has a lot of emotional intelligence, but you can see when she gets hurt, and you can see when she's in touch with that. But I'm going to take some liberties in here for the sake of the example. And let's say that this is the episode where Angela, says something snarky about Pam's wedding and how, subpar it was, and so on and so forth. And not to mention that Pam was already pregnant and this and that. Instead of lashing out, what if Pam was to sit with her and say, I hear that you're saying that, it looks like I just kind of meatball my wedding, didn't put a lot of effort in it. And yeah, I did walk in white and I was pregnant already and everything. And I can imagine in contrast, you put, all this effort in your wedding to the senator, and you did such a great job with us, the guests and everything, but like nobody noticed it. And that makes you feel sad. And of course, you're going to be looking at my wedding, people talking about it, no better or no worse than they're talking about yours. Or maybe, you only hear that they're talking about my wedding and not yours. And that makes you angry because you put all this effort and nobody sees that. And you feel, unseen. And of course, you're going to be angry, but in reality, Angela is just sad. She's really sad, because she feels undervalued, so she has to devaluate everybody else. People that are oriented to depth psychology, this is a good time to sit with Carl Jung and do a little bit of shadow work. And shadow work is another way to say that we use the shady side of you, pun intended, okay? And invite it in, be kind to it. You have complete compassion for it. And you try to see what this shady side of you is trying to tell you, and ways to honor it. It doesn't mean you go ahead and give it permission to act it out, but you try to find out what is that trying to say to you and how you can grow and thrive and learn about yourself. And forgive yourself for that shady side tendencies. And you can employ a different coping mechanism in a positive way, but that's another topic for perhaps tomorrow. People that are oriented to emotion theory can sit in this point and see, what is this sadness? Where's it coming from? Is there an attachment injury with Angela that she's trying to heal herself from? Was she not seen by her attachment fear? Was she neglected? And, is she rebelling, and just being obnoxious with everybody because she is seeping from that wound? So, interesting. So, in the context of life coaching, Burton challenges in his book to explore what type of person would we be if we did not have this ego coping mechanisms or defense mechanisms to cope when our window of tolerance, we're getting very proximal to the edges, right? And how employing them positively in terms of process help us to stay functional. And it helps us because if somebody is, being really mean to us at work, it's okay to say, I'm sure they're a good guy, and this is just, they might have their job, or there might be something wrong with them that they need help with, but, I'm sure he is loved, and there's nothing to do with me. Clearly, this person, and I'm gonna be a friend to the extent I can be a friend, and I'm going to celebrate the positive, but I'm going to be aware of the negative and guard myself. Well, you're not idealizing the entirety of that person to the point, identifying with that person to the point that you start acting bullying like them in the office and taking their side and then even ganging up with them against others. You are idealizing you're identifying with the things that you are alike. You're different but alike. So you can identify with the parts of that person that are positive and set proper boundaries on the negative parts. It doesn't have to be we are friends or not kind of deal. So when you can beat them, join them, that is negative identification coping process. Okay, you can join them temporarily, and when they start acting out, hey, not riding that train, and set your boundaries. But in the meantime, it helps you cope at work because you're having a sense of agency and your own identity, not being dishonored. So tomorrow I'm going to go ahead and expand on how to employ the process of ego defense mechanisms for introspection, for growth, so we may thrive in health and light. You have a great day. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.